Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the Good News Podcast today. Today, we've got not just one guest, we've got three guests. All three are really good friends of mine, and I'm telling you, they are living so fully what we're going to be talking about today. We're talking about reflecting back on 2021, because man, what a year that it's been. And to be completely honest, sometimes when we have these conversations, it can be a little depressing because there's so many things that didn't happen. Well, this year, that happened like in a huge way. But what I love where this conversation ends up going is actually a place of grace and inspiration and actually seeing God at work even when some of the things didn't happen the way that we intended or thought they might. I think you're going to enjoy this one. Glad you're along for the ride. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the Good News Podcast. We are starting a 2-week series on really reflecting on 2021 and then looking ahead to 2022. I have some really good friends with me, Steve Allin, Jim Christian, and Lexi Black, and I can't wait to enter into this conversation. These are the kind of things that we talk about, to be honest, all the time when we're going for a walk, before and after our meetings. So it's nice to kind of go public, if you will, with this conversation, share some of it. Hope you are inspired, encouraged by what we share as well. Really important stuff as we head into a new year. And so it's always good to look back and reflect. My goodness, we'll get into this conversation a little bit, how this is more important than ever before because of this pandemic and how challenging these times are. But just generally, the power of reflecting, the power of thinking and looking back on what has been, especially at this time of year. Let's talk a bit about that. And, we haven't really talked about this, but it just seems to me to be fair to go ladies first. So we'll just toss it over to Lexi and see what are some of your thinking around that, Lexi, and how it's been important for you.
Sure, no pressure to be the first one to start off the conversation.
Jim actually paid me to do that, but anyway, we'll let it go. I shouldn't have said that. Yeah.
Well, I do think it's important to reflect on the year. It helps you to just take a look and see what you have really accomplished, because you get into the day-to-day grind of things and you don't really think about, or I don't really think about what I'm doing or how I've accomplished it. But if I stop and pause and look back over the year, it's like, wow, I did this by March. I did this in May, June. When I add it all up, it helps put things into perspective. Also helps me to assess where I thought I was going to go during the year and how life got in the way, or how my plans maybe weren't aligned with what God's plans were for me, and for me to reassess and look a little bit, tweak the plan for the coming year.
Yeah. I love what you said about just sometimes you would miss these things that are worth celebrating, and right. And just, because sometimes we can feel like we haven't really done much, whether it's the course of a day, a week, a year, and somehow reflecting takes you into a beautiful time of celebration. What do you guys think about that?
It is powerful. And it reminds me of when I started doing this. I used to be in the corporate world. And, you have that annual performance appraisal, and I never felt prepared. I never, what have I done, and, and so I started doing monthly, and so it was, and I realized tremendous value way beyond the performance appraisal. Of course, I was better prepared for that.
Yeah.
But just the act of regular reflection to go, to think, and for me, it's been monthly, like for decades now, to think about the last month or whatever period of time it is, to acknowledge some of the things that have, that you've done. Maybe you had whatever your plan was, there's some ones that got done or made some really good progress on. And that's encouraging, to do that. And then to look ahead as well, to what's next. So I've really found it, affirming and helpful tool and process for me. And one that, I guess helps me actually to do, to focus better and plan better, those kinds of things as well.
Yeah,
so a lot of power in it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree in the sense of, we'll get next week to looking at goals in 2022 and looking ahead, but it's really amazing to me how it's almost not possible to move into the future without looking back a little bit to see where you've come from, even naming what is current reality. And Leonard Sweetie, he's a Christian author and speaker, and he offers this beautiful image of a swing. And, if you've been on a swing, remember you got to lean back and kick forward, and you really can't kick forward until you lean back. when you're doing a swing, but also when you're planning for your life, we'd miss so much. Like if we didn't do that.
Yeah, well, same on what Lexi and Steve have said. It just helps you gain perspective, right? It helps you celebrate what you have done, and because you've forgotten a lot of it, and two, like what went right, what went wrong, and what could you have done differently, and if you've missed the mark, why, and have grace for yourself that you didn't because life got in the way or something happened. And we've all experienced that this year with COVID, right? Yeah. It gave us twists and turns that we didn't expect. So I think it's just good to sit in that. And since I've started doing it, it's really helped me with higher self-awareness. If I'm feeling energetic, I can reflect on it. If I'm not feeling energetic, it allows me to reflect on it. And I kind of do it more annually, but also quarterly and weekly to which direction am I going? And to celebrate. We just don't celebrate enough of what we've been able to accomplish or achieve or get done. So.
Yeah. I love that, and we're going to get to how, because I think sometimes people may even get to a point where they think, hey, it's a good idea. I don't know how to do this. So really want to actually get concrete and how do you do that? But before that, two things that just are too important to miss here, I think, and the one is they're almost opposites. Interesting, I think, as we're talking here. The one is the celebration. Like what does it look like to celebrate? And then the other piece is sometimes it can be depressing, like looking back. And I think people avoid it because, I don't want to, because things didn't happen like I wanted to happen. And so let's start with that. Like how do you make this, to be quite frank, not a depressing exercise that just reminds you of all the stuff that you didn't get to that you might have wanted to do? Because that can happen probably almost every year. Does happen to some level, especially for those that have big goals, lots of intentions, but especially over this past year. And so jump in, whoever's, like jump in here, guys. How do you make this not, honestly, like a depressing thing that just reminds you of all the things you didn't get to or that you screwed up or whatever, right? Or the wheels fell off the bus, sort of thing. Yeah.
Well, the goals that you set they're at a point in time, right? It's the best information you have, the decisions that you've made, or after consultation with others, for example. Yeah. And so you've got that intention, but you know that no matter how much planning you've done, there will be changes. Things will happen. I also, to be honest, I put some goals in every month that I'm almost guaranteed to make.
The preload.
We call that sandbagging, Steve.
You taught me that. I love it.
It is helpful because these are still significant, right? Absolutely. They're significant goals. It's not trivial.
Yeah.
So they're important because one of the reasons you have that confidence is because they do matter. You're putting in the time and energy. And so acknowledge that. It's okay. And then to have some that are stretching you a little bit. Mm-hmm. I like to look at mine and say, odds are pretty good I'm going to get this 80%. And if at the end of the year, generally I've done that, I feel pretty good about it. It's been very different with COVID. I haven't achieved 80%. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's 60, maybe it's 50, because just the environment, it changed things. And we have to give ourselves some grace around those and just understand that the goals we set, some of them just simply couldn't, right? There was just no opportunity to do that. And new things arose that needed to be taken care of. So there is some, grace around that.
Yeah.
For me, I have to have.
Yeah, that's awesome, Steve. I love both setting some things that are going to happen or already are in motion, but then also the idea that maybe you're not going to reach them. And I think that's a mindset thing, isn't it? And I'm imagining people who I've experienced these kind of conversations with on both sides. People who say, "Why do you always set goals that you don't reach?" And others who say, "Keep setting them and set them bigger because you'll be further along than you will be, without them." And that's what I'm hearing you. How do you handle that, Jim? Because I think that's a reality for all of us. I see that in your life and leadership as well.
Yeah, well, I try to pull back the skin of the onion, right? Why didn't I get there? Did it I have to revise the goal? Maybe it really wasn't important. Was there a circumstance that caused it not to be achieved, but it's still a goal that's at another timeline? Just what did I achieve rather than that? Did a circumstance change that took time away, to do something that was urgent and important? So just, peel that onion back as much as you can to find it. And sometimes you just have to sit that you lost track of it and you didn't do it.
Yeah.
And then have that grace that Steve talked about. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's set it. It is our goal, right? Like it's up to us. If we want to change it, we can.
Yeah.
We don't have to live and die by it.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point. And I think grace comes in that too, like with yourself, that you set this goal. This was your intent. And it's okay to change it. And I know for me, sometimes it's like, okay, if that goal didn't happen, well, sometimes, you know what, maybe it wasn't that important. Like you said earlier, maybe I shouldn't even have put that one down. So let's let that one go. If it's important, it'll come back another year. Or sometimes for me, I don't know, maybe this is just me trying to put a positive spin on it, but I think, okay, well, maybe that was a 2-year goal, not a 1-year goal. Maybe that was for next year. And I was working so far ahead. God had me working so far ahead. I didn't realize that I set goals this year for next year. But I think you gotta have fun. And I think I love that we're all smiling and laughing. But I think when that's grace, right? That's grace. That whatever happens, we can smile, we can laugh, and we can be empowered to keep moving forward, not paralyzed by the past.
Right.
Lexi, love to get your take on, and we're still kind of drilling down into how does this not become a depressing exercise for people that maybe, especially some people could be listening to this and afraid to even do that kind of thinking or reflecting back.
So I think for me, when I set a goal, I have some steps, like a few first steps. So I may not have the whole plan figured out of how I'm going to achieve this goal, but I may have a couple of first steps. So if I'm keeping track of those and I'm checking in fairly regularly on where I'm at with the goals, at least I can measure that, okay, so I contacted this person and reached out about this and I got help in this area, or I've practiced X number of times this week to accomplish something. So I know that I've made some progress. I may not accomplish the goal in its entirety, but at least I'll have made a little bit of progress. I've moved the needle a little bit. And that helps me keep it in perspective and feel a little bit better about the final result, because I see that it is a process, and I have progressed. And I think that helped for me. Keeping it on my radar as well regularly. So whether you're checking it quarterly, whether you're checking it weekly, whether you're checking it daily, your list of goals, I think that helps keep it on your radar so that you're constantly thinking about, okay, what can I do this week or what can I do this month to move forward a little bit. And I think that's how I have approached the challenge.
I love that. I love that. So even if you didn't reach the goal, like you've moved it along a little bit, you've done some things to at least, move the needle, if you will. That's awesome.
I think when Lexi was talking there, 2 things came to mind. One was this step should take you to a place of gratitude, right? No matter what, you should be driven to a place where you're grateful for what did get done, whether it's that goal or something else, but a place of gratitude of what has happened. And the second is, measure the gain, not the gap, right? Like how far have you come? Maybe you didn't get all the way, but you got to 50% or you got to 40%. You're further along than you were when you set the goal. So, that should put you at a place of gratitude, right? That, okay, we've moved it forward.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a huge one, isn't it? Yeah. Like when you think about not making this a depressing exercise, being inspired by it, because if we just look at where we still need to go, we miss that celebration of how far we've come. And I can't tell you how many conversations I had in the last week where that's been at the heart of that conversation, for me or for whoever I'm talking to. Like that's what are some examples? Let's kind of maybe hang on that one for a minute, like where we see things in our own life or example from others. If it's easier to talk about someone else's life, sometimes it is, especially around this kind of stuff where, if we're honest, like it's not there yet. Like it's not where I want it to be, where we want it to be. But if I look back and think, I'm further along, or we're further along now than we were a year ago, or a month ago, or 10 years ago, or whatever it might be. Let's toss that one out there and just see what we do with that one, just to put some meat on these bones of what does that mean to mind the gain, not just the gap.
Well, I guess for one of my goals for this past year was, hit our revenue and target for our business, right? And we didn't hit it. But when you sit in that for a little bit, and that not hitting that means we can't do some other things that we'd hoped and planned for. But when you sit and think about it, we survived 2 quarters of COVID, right? We didn't have to lay anyone off. We improved our processes. We strengthened our team. We advanced the needle forward, setting us up for success in the future. So, yeah, we didn't hit the number, but we moved the needle forward. So to setting us up for doing it in the future. So I think that to me is, if I was just sat on the number, it could get depressing. But things did move forward. Things did happen that were positive. So that would be one. Another more personal one was I had a goal for taking swimming lessons this year, right? And because of COVID, that couldn't happen, despite trying to set up a private pool and a private lesson, and it just couldn't make it work, But I'm further ahead now. I got a couple pools potentially lined up for next year. I got a couple instructors that potentially could work next year, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. But again, it's further along. If it hadn't been a goal, and away we go. Yeah. How about you, Lexi? Any examples that come to mind around this?
Yeah. So my default way of thinking is it's an all or nothing mentality. That's where I first go to, all or nothing. So I did or I didn't do it. And then I have to process the fact that, okay, I did this much, or I accomplished this much. So I had some great plans and goals for my overall physical health and well-being this year. And I didn't achieve. Okay, so for weight loss, I had a number in my head of how much weight I was going to lose by the end of the year. I didn't lose that much, but I lost, a significant portion of that amount. So I have to think about, okay, I didn't get quite as far as I wanted to do, but I did lose quite a bit, and I'm healthier than I've ever been, and feeling better, and have more energy, and sleep better, and just more involved than ever before in my kids' lives and stuff like that. So I have to think about it that way. But when I first think of it, I think of, okay, I didn't hit that target number that I had planned, and that's that all or nothing mentality. And then as I dig a little deeper and reflect a little more, I see that, and it doesn't have to stop come December 31st. It's one of those, this is just going to carry on, and I'm going to continue to grow and be healthy and get better. So
that's awesome. That's a great example, Lexi, because I'm sure there's many people who can, and then we get defeated by that, and we give up, and we go back to old habits or old patterns, and yeah, so that's so cool. And especially when that's not your go-to, your go-to is just, I didn't get there. And then, but a little bit more reflection. This is what reflection does, right? You see things that you wouldn't otherwise have seen when you take the time to reflect. And an example for me is I had this for me, it was a bit of a crazy goal, because it was to run a half marathon at a pace that I haven't ran in years. And it stretched the, what I mean? Like, it was crazy. And so I was going hard this summer to try to push towards this. And then I had some injuries. I had some Achilles problems, and I tried to work through that, and it meant I couldn't run as often. And I still tried to do it on the day that we'd set. And anyway, some of you were there. It was not pretty. Like, I was good for at least half, but then the base of the last 3Ks, I could barely walk. Like, it was terrible. I was in pain for like 3 days afterwards. It was a couple weeks before I could do much. Like, it was just nasty. Like, it was so sad. Like, it was so bad. It's kind of funny. Like, I'm pastor, so I also have a job that I got to do. And so that morning we ran. That afternoon I had a funeral here at the church, and I had to actually strategize to minimize the amount of times that I walked up and back to the platform, because I could barely walk, but I'm laughing now, but I was not happy that day. I was frustrated. I was sad. I was depressed. Like, I was depressed about that. But as time has gone on, as a few weeks have passed, for me, it was like, I've actually remembered back to those runs in the summer that were pushing me, that I really enjoyed. Like it was fun. It was because life can kind of just stay this. It changed me. I was working out in a different way, at a different rhythm, with a different energy. And so I think for me, there's also a part of, don't forget, it isn't just the end goal. Like, it can't be just about the end goal. And did you accomplish it or not? It's really about the process in getting there. And I think sometimes if we just look at the end goal, black or white, win or lose, we miss the process. And God's always at work in the process.
Well, sometimes the process can be the goal, right? I'm going to run this many kilometers a week, or whatever it is, or there may be some so many hours a week that I'm going to devote to it, and then the outcome kind of becomes a product of that, rather than say I'm going to lose this much or I'm going to run this distance. It's these this process metric will help move me towards that, and I can acknowledge and I can feel good. And acknowledge the progress, the achievement of the process. So I think that's another way of looking at it, rather than the outcome. There's this thing called lead indicators versus lag indicators, right? A lag indicator is the outcome. A lead indicator is, what am I doing to get there? And sometimes measuring that lead. Okay, I'm working out every day, or I'm spending time reading. If goal is to read more, right? I'm going to learn something. I put in 30 minutes a day of reading, whatever. So there's some lead indicators that can be really, really helpful.
Which sometimes are more in your control. It still takes discipline and those kinds of things, but more in your control. That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, let's talk all things celebration. Let's go back to that gratitude thing, because I think for us, as we talk about it and think about it, we've done this long enough, as far as the power of reflection and really being intentional about that we know there's always this piece of gratitude and celebration that comes with it. I know for me, it's definitely something that I want to do more of. Not so much the reflecting, absolutely, I can always do more of that, but it's the celebrating. It's the pointing out of those wins, or where we've seen God at work, and really, really taking time to honor that, to celebrate that, to talk about that, to put a party on, to recognize it, like whatever it might be. But let's talk about that a little bit too, just so we don't miss that part of reflection that takes us to a place of gratitude and celebration. Even if we think maybe about this past year, this is probably a good way for us to move into this one, because this has been a hard year. Like this. It's been a hard 2 years, with COVID, and we know we're not alone. Those who are watching and listening will have experienced that too. But even more important now to think back and reflect on where we've been blessed and where we've seen some really good things happen in our life. Maybe planned or intended, some maybe unplanned or unintended, and they just sort of happened as we went through the year. Jim, what comes to your mind as you think back to this past year in particular, and where you've seen some blessing and want to give thanks for that?
Yeah, well, we had two big milestones this year. Sherry and I celebrated 40 years of marriage, and Sherry celebrated being 60 years old. And she's happy to be 60, so I'm not scared of saying.
I was like, oops.
Yeah. But in both cases, we had to really kind of be creative in how we were going to celebrate that because of COVID. And it was just good to sit in that celebration. For our anniversary was several days that we were able to do a few different things, and for her birthday, planned a weekend and just sat in that celebration and reflected on what the last 40 years was like to be together. And so I think that for me, I was probably more intentional than ever before to take time and reflect on that and celebrate that. And then sometimes it's just a little win on a Friday night. You have a glass of wine and you're just talking about what really did happen this week and how could we celebrate that, and it's this little things, but daily blessings, right? That you can just sit in and be blessed with.
Absolutely. Nasty.
Yeah. Sometimes for me, it's as simple as just sharing it with my wife, or my good friends, some accomplishments, and, be able to experience, their joy or appreciation for it. It often doesn't need to be a big deal, but by that act of sharing, I find that reaffirm or affirming, and often that's good enough. I mean, that's really helpful for me to do that and hear some affirmation come back.
Just to acknowledge it, and to talk about it, and then the little things. Because sometimes there's just these little things again, the power of reflection that we would just miss if we didn't take time to think about it and recognize it. Yeah, Lexi, big smile on your face. What are you thinking about? Yeah.
So I just, there's some people that have been part of the journey with you, with me, right, on various goals. So it's keeping them in the loop when I've accomplished a milestone. So whether it's just sending a quick text and say, hey, I ran 5K in under 30 minutes, I beat my goal. Those kinds of things. Sometimes it's just sharing it, but it's sharing it with key people that are going to understand the significance of you achieving this goal or achieving this milestone on your way to reaching a goal. Sometimes I had a latte waiting for me at the end of the finish line when I ran my first half marathon, just having that treat for myself at the end. Sometimes if it's a big one, I may plan a special dinner or I may go out and buy myself something small. Sorry, my dogs are in the background. And
they're celebrating. No, they're celebrating. They're celebrating.
Applauding. They're applauding.
Right. But it just depends on the goal and who I'm sharing it with and sort of the significance. If it's something I've been working at for a long time, then I may be a bigger milestone and I may choose to celebrate it in a different way. But again, it's sharing it with key people who can celebrate it with you, that understand the significance of how hard you've worked to reach it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I can tell you, Lexi, as being on the other end of some of those texts from you, like it makes my heart sing. Like it feels like I've accomplished something, like, because it is we're in it together. So I would just encourage people to really, I think sometimes we hold off on these things. We say in our head, oh, it's not that big a deal, or I don't want to brag, and it's not about putting it in the newspapers. It's sharing with a friend. And it actually, I just really believe we need to do more of this. I need to do more of this. Because as leaders, as people who are driven, I know for me, I'm often thinking about what's to come next and how can we make it better, as opposed to just being present sometimes and just enjoying and celebrating what has already been. Like that's what reflection is. It isn't just looking back at where we've messed up and trying to improve it, though there's a piece of that which can be really inspiring, to be honest. But I would say it's at least 50% or more, this whole idea of celebrating, of acknowledging, of where we've seen God at work for we who are people of faith. In fact, something that's been on my heart recently is, do we miss God's activity in this world, in this form of even miracles, like even little miracles, if you will, because we don't take enough time to celebrate when these things happen, to share them, to acknowledge them. And we so quickly go on to, where the world is wrong and trying to fix that or pray for that or whatever that might be. And so I'm right now really trying to be, God has me to a point where I'm really just trying to be more aware of those and take some time with them. And so even on a Sunday morning, just trying every Sunday to have something that we're celebrating, where we've seen God at work, and not to miss how amazing and how awesome, that is. Yeah. Okay. What we haven't talked about yet is, how do we do this? Like, because again, it's an art, but there are practical things that we can do intentionally in order to look back, in order to reflect and really pay attention. Whether it's in the course of a year, like we're talking now, or even the other rhythms that are part of our life. So let's talk a little bit about that, so people get a sense of, remind us how we do this, but also for others to get a sense, if they were interested in trying this out, what does this look like? What do you actually do to be intentional about reflecting?
Well, there's all kinds of tools out there, but for me, the process is just writing it down, right? Like, just if you, for the year, just start thinking about and writing down what was achieved, what was accomplished. And maybe you didn't have goals going into this year, but you can still sit and go, this happened, this happened, this happened. and just reflect on that and go this and get fed from that. And you can do a little analysis. What went right, what went wrong, what could you improve? But just sitting in that, and making that list, and I do it weekly. But at the end of the year, it's a great time just to make that list in a journal, a piece of paper, wherever you can, on your computer. I like physically writing. I think there's something about the therapy of having a pen in your hand and a paper and seeing those words come to life. But some people can get that off a computer, but I can't.
Yeah, for sure. You reminded me. One Thanksgiving, we put this big piece of flip chart paper on our window at home and in the kitchen, and we said, okay, we're going to fill this up with things that we're grateful for. And it was because a whole bunch of stuff come easy, and it was like, okay, there's a lot of space left on this sucker, and it took some time. It took us deeper, but also just reminded us of some things that we otherwise would have missed that we were grateful for. Yeah, Lexi, how about you? What are some of the tools or practices that you might use to be intentional about taking time to reflect and looking back?
I did it again. I'm sorry, I was on mute.
All good.
I set aside time every week.
Nice.
To reflect. Sunday evening, usually. At the end of the day, usually involves some prayer time, either before or after it, and it just sort of quiets my mind, and it's that quiet time of intentional, and it's not long. 20 minutes, maybe 15, 20 minutes, half an hour tops, where I just sit and reflect and look at the week, and it helps me plan for the week to come, as I see what I was working on and what was a priority last week, and how far I've come. And maybe there's some things that I need to continue looking at in the week to come. And maybe there's some stuff that I can cross off that list and move on for. But really, for me, this strategy is having that time, and it's usually around the same time every week. So it's having that structure built into my day, into my week, where I have that intentional time. And I'm like Jim, I write it down, not a lot. It's just in sort of bullet points, and that's been what works for me.
That's awesome. I love the rhythm. The rhythm comes to mind as you're talking, Lex, that you've kind of built this rhythm into your week and into your day, which is prayer, isn't it? Like you said, it's a spiritual activity where we listen to our life and listen to God at work in our life. And that's awesome. Steve, how about you? How do you practice this?
Well, much the same. Although I do use the computer in my case.
Jim loves you anyway. Don't worry.
Handwriting is a trial for me, and but the thing is, I have some standard practices. So I actually have a template. Lexi mentioned point form, and I do it in point form, and I take the same format and structure, so I don't have to think about that. I use the same one every time, and so it's not kind of reinventing things. It really is focusing on the actual goals. And one of the things I also do is I flip through my calendar. What are some of the things in my calendar? Sometimes that's a reminder of some of the things that were accomplished and done. So there's a few little tools that I've incorporated to try and make it a simple process, and one that's not laborious or time consuming in particular, but that I can fairly quickly address it, and then it kind of fits in naturally into my week or month or whatever period.
Yeah, and you don't have to think about it. Like this is what I love, and I love the idea of looking back over your calendar, because I think sometimes that is part of the hard part. What did happen? And it takes energy to remember, but it's amazing when you do that. All of a sudden, like, oh yeah, that happened this year, that happened this week, that happened this month, and then there's a whole. It's kind of like when you see a picture, there's a whole story behind it. Something in your calendar often has a whole story behind it, and often things have happened that are really worth celebrating. And so, great tips and tools. I know I love to journal. I use the TSP. Thank you, sorry, please. So every morning starts with thank you from the day before. And it's amazing the things that I just wouldn't think about. But there's also lots of ways to do this together as a community, as a team, as a company, as a family. You can just sit around and talk about these things. And that's interesting too, to do with people who you love, especially, as we move into New Year's time and next year. I know that's been a practice at our house where we have this little book and we bring it out every New Year's Day. And we just kind of remind ourselves and list some of the things that happened over the course of the year. I remember when Katrina and I were, just starting our life together. We would just sit around and it was something we really began doing together. And that's fun too, because then all the pressure isn't on just you, it's on the people who you're with. But also what I mean by that is people think of things that you don't think of sometimes. Yeah. And for a team, like if you're leading a team, a sports team, or a group at work and in leadership, it's a really great practice. It'll align you, it'll connect you together. And you don't just have to wait till once a year to do it. You could do it very regularly. You can take a long time or a short time, but it'll change the temperature in the room. So anyway, we could go on all day, but we have another part to do for next week. So want to maybe draw us to a close now and just say thanks for this. I have so enjoyed this conversation with you. I hope you have also enjoyed this, friends, as you watch and listen today. Again, as I said at the beginning, this is part 1 of 2. We will be back next week where we're going to move in the other direction. We take some time to look at reflection and how the power of that. But next week, we'll look at how do you set goals for the future? How do you really move into the next year with a sense of intentionality and that same grace that we've talked about today. So hope you can join us next week. Thanks, Lexi. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Steve, for being a part of the Good News podcast today. Wow, my goodness. I loved that we talked about celebration so much. Here we are reflecting on the year that was, especially when you think about living in the midst of a pandemic. It continues to be honest, so challenging. And yet so much of that conversation reflecting back was celebrating the wins, celebrating God at work, celebrating amazing things that happened. Some we planned, some we hadn't. Friends, I hope you got a sense of celebration, of inspiration through this conversation as well. So good to have you join us. Hope you can join us next week as we do part 2 of this conversation that takes us into next year, 2022, setting goals, getting intentional, having the best year yet. It's going to be an awesome chat. Hope you can join us. Again, thanks so much. God bless you. See you again soon.